Wednesday here on MSNBC, and today we're focusing on the war in Iraq, a war that will be passed on to either Barack Obama or John McCain. Just yesterday, President Bush signed a $162 billion spending bill that will pay for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan into next year. The bill signing comes as violence in Iraq has hit a 4-year low. Still, U.S. troop deaths in Iraq rose to 29 in June from 19 in May. That May number was the lowest since the U.S.-led invasion in 2003. Mackenzie Eaglin is a national security analyst for the Heritage Foundation, and Michael Siner is director of the Homeland Security Presidential Initiative. Nice to see you both today.
Thank you.
Michael, is there a sense here that things have certainly improved since General Petraeus last was talking to lawmakers on Capitol Hill?
Well, look, I mean, anytime you put 30,000 more troops into a country, you're going to see security gains. I mean, that's obvious, and it's a credit to the brave men and women in our fighting forces. The question, I mean, the bigger question is, why do we need the surge in the first place? And that was because these guys, including John McCain sitting in the Senate, mismanaged this war so badly in the first place. And secondly, putting Iraq into a broader geopolitical or strategic context, it has made things worse in 4 ways. It's made Afghanistan a lot worse. It's given Pakistan, it's given a safe haven to Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. It's been terrible for our relations with Iran, which has made Iran stronger. And it's brought our military to the breaking point.
Michael, John McCain himself has criticized the management of the war and did so before the campaign season was fully in swing. But Mackenzie, at this point, he says the troop surge is working. He was a big proponent of the troop surge before it began, and now he says it's working. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. All the trend lines are moving in the right direction on 3 fronts. Militarily, of course, with Iraqi civilian deaths down, coalition losses as well, ethno-sectarian violence is down, and terrorist attacks are down. Politically, the Iraqi parliament has passed legislation, albeit small, but important steps on things like amnesty, provincial powers, and other pieces. And then finally, economically, we're definitely seeing progress where you have an increase in new business registration. Inflation has dropped 60%. The Iraqi government budget has doubled, and crude oil levels are back up to pre-war levels.
You know, go ahead.
You know, the administration did release some of those benchmarks just you know, recently, but I'll tell you one that's really important. They changed the measure from too early to tell to unsatisfactory on whether or not the government has gotten control of militias. I mean, you know, Max Weber said that the way you define a successful state is if it has a monopoly on legitimate violence, and this state doesn't even have control of its own territory. If you have militias like Muqtada al-Sadr's militia running.
So if that's the case, Michael, then if Barack Obama wins the presidency and says he would immediately begin pulling U.S. troops out, removing all troops within 16 months, then how would that help gain a handle then on the militias? Won't you see the Muqtada al-Sadr's of Iraq stepping back in to fill that vacuum?
What almost every credible expert in this field recognizes and says over and over again is what you need is a political solution where you get the different Sunni parties together, you get the different Shia parties together, you get the regional parties, and you get all these tribes together and you actually broker a political solution. I mean, until then, this is like very expensive duct tape that's holding this thing just together enough to kick it down the road. I mean, that's basically the policy we've seen, and that's what was represented with the 100-year comment that McCain gave. I mean, if you're basically just trying to hold it together,
and just to put that comment into context, what he said was we would be in Iraq for 100 years as long as Americans weren't being maimed or injured. That being said, Mackenzie, Michael just brought up the political solutions and how critical that is. Given the failures that we have seen in the past and the very small gains, how do you encourage the Iraqis to come together and really figure this out?
Well, I think the recent operations in Basra were encouraging in one level because it demonstrated the Iraqi government leadership's independence and ability to enforce the rule of law. It also, of course, exposed some vulnerabilities, which include the need for U.S. forces to continue to stay because Iraqi security forces are still very dependent on American troops, hopefully not forever, and increasingly over time it will be more of a support role that our forces play.
But if our forces leave, won't they be forced to step up to the plate? I mean, isn't setting the bar high, the expectation high, part of the goal?
Sure, but if you withdraw too quickly and they're not ready, we'd have to go back in even greater numbers.
Mackenzie, Michael, I appreciate the participation from you both. Thanks.
Thanks.